Hello and welcome to another video in the video series Pinyin to Singing the Art of Sung Chinese. Today we're going to talk about the sounds in a final. If you remember from the previous video, we talked about how in a syllable or in a Chinese character we have an initial and a final, which makes up a whole syllable or the sound of a character. And today we are mainly talking about the sounds in a final, which is the majority of the time a vowel sound. Now, if you remember, in finals, we have a nucleus, which is a vowel, and then we have a coda. And depending on the language, there can be different possibilities of what can happen in the coda of the syllable. In the case of Chinese, when the coda is a consonant, it can only have one of the two. On the screen, you see two IPA symbols. The first one is N, the N sound, which is spelled in English as an N and sounds exactly like that. The second one you see is ng sound, which in English is spelled ng. So we have one of the two. One is n, one is ng as a consonant in Chinese. Another possibility in the coda is a glide. Glides can take two forms. One is an on glide, one is an off glide. A glide basically means a sound that travels quickly to or from a vowel. So in the case of on glide happens before the vowel sound. So for example, we have two examples here. The first example is an Italian word, più, which means more. And in this word, the E is a glide. So it is a J glide, which means that the E sound carries very quickly to the main vowel, which is U. So you will say più, più, instead of più. The second example is a French word, suis. Je suis means I am. And in this case, the main vowel is an E vowel. And you have a glide of what we call a Y glide, which is a combination, essentially a combination of the J glide and the W glide into a mixed U sound. So suis instead of suis. And then we have, on the other hand, an off glide, which means that the glide happens at the end of the vowel and it happens quickly. So for instance, we have two English words because off glides happen very frequently in English. The word buy, B-U-Y, will say buy instead of buy. And the second word is bow. Again, the same main vowel, R, with a different glide, this time a W glide, bow instead of bow. Now I'm going to take a little time to explain about IPA. The IPA is International Phonetic Alphabets, which are a series of alphabets created to show specific sounds. And if you remember in the previous slides, I showed sounds which are written in a square bracket, and they are all IPA symbols. And IPA symbols are great if you go online and find a website like this one that I'm going to show you. You can find tables like this, and it shows you the vowels, the vowel chart with all the different symbols of IPA, and you can actually click on it, and it will actually play the sound for you to hear what it is like exactly. So you have a table like this, or you also have a table like the consonants, and it's all from this website www.ipachart.com. Now, IPA is a very great resource to know what to pronounce and what kind of sound we are actually expecting as a listener. But bear in mind that in singing, IPA might be a little bit limited because of the nature of singing, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. One of the main things in singing is vowels, obviously, because vowels are the sound that we phonate in singing. And vowels takes many form, and it is built up of different types of color. And if you are talking about singing technique, we have different placements, we have different resonance, we have the bright, the dark, the old Italian school of chiaroscuro is the whole concept of balancing between the bright sound and the dark sound. And hence in singing, especially in classical singing, we have a lot of combination of different types of color, and sometimes a color of vowel can be distorted. So that is why I said IPA can be a little bit limited in terms of singing. In Chinese, there are only 7 sung vowels, 7 types of sung vowels, and they are all very familiar vowels, and let's go through them. The first one is R, which is the vowel that exists in almost all languages. And then we have E. If you know the IPA alphabets, this E sound is actually what we call a closed E. The next one we have is O, and again, this is the symbol is for a closed O sound, which, for instance, in German you have O, which is very closed, which might not be as closed as an Italian closed O when it is spoken. The next one, this might look a little bit weird for many of us, but this is essentially coming from a schwa sound, and a schwa basically means a neutral vowel sound, which we find in English, especially when the syllables are not stressed. A very good example will be my own name. In American pronunciation, where you stress the second syllable of my name, you will just say it with an R vowel, Bernard. But in the UK pronunciation, you will stress the first syllable, which means that the second syllable is actually reduced to an unstressed syllable, and it's reduced to a schwa, which sounds like Bernard, Bernard, is the schwa sound. And this symbol is an open version of schwa, which I use in sung Chinese because native Chinese speakers would sing this vowel instead of the very neutral. Going down the list, we have E, and then next we have the mixed vowel, Ü, which we can find in German and French. German written with a U with 2 dots on top, or an umlaut. In French, anytime you see a letter U, it's most of the time pronounced as Ü. And finally, we have U, which is also, again, a vowel which is very common. Going back to the closed A and closed O symbols that I used, it doesn't mean that the closed version should be used in sung Chinese. I'm just using a symbol to cover the category of the vowel color in this group. Anything between are acceptable. Equally, for O, anything between or will be acceptable. I talked a little bit about how in singing the vowels can have different colors because of the acoustic of singing, especially in classical singing. Now in Chinese, the coloring of the vowels in sung Chinese is actually flexible. What I mean by that is not to sing an O instead of an R, or to sing an U instead of an E. Not that kind of flexible, but flexible in terms of the general coloration of the vowel. For instance, if you're singing an R, anything between R to ah is acceptable as long as it is perceived as that vowel. And we talked about acoustics in singing, and we have chiaroscuro, we have the brightness of the voice and the darkness of the voice. So when a singer thinks that they are singing a closed A, for example, it sometimes might come off as a more open version of that vowel, just purely because of the acoustics, and also depending on the tessitura, depending on the range in their voice. Now, the reason I say that vowels are flexible in sung Chinese is because the vowel flexibilities actually comes from the tones in the language. You know, Chinese is a tonal language, as we talked about in the last video. And so, when the text is set to music, the tones actually disappear because the music, in music, you are singing pitches instead of trying to make a contour of pitch in a syllable. And so then in speech, because we are relying on the tones so much, the vowels that we make are actually very flexible. So flexible that there is a phenomenon that happens that is called assimilations. Assimilation is a phenomenon where we change a certain sound depending on what comes before or after the sound that we make. A good example of this is in English when we say one of the two. Try saying one time and one thing quickly. One time, one thing. You might realize that when you're saying one thing, your tongue is actually preparing for the consonant th in thing when you're saying the end sound of one. So instead of one thing, you would say one thing. This is an example of assimilation. So in Chinese, vowels can actually assimilate depending on what comes after or before. Vowel colors do change to a more close version or a more open version of the vowel depending on what comes before or after. And hence, in singing, there is no need to fix the color of the vowel or the openness or the closeness of the vowel like how we will if we are singing in German or French. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight on vowels and on the sounds in the final. In the next video, we'll go into a bit more detail and talk about the sounds in the specific vowel groups and how we use the Pinyin transcription to know how to pronounce the final of a character. So I'll see you then.